Alright, I'm going to be doing a commentary for a 25 AA that we did last week on Tyrannical, Raging, Storming, on obviously Thundering. I'm going to be going over my talents, things that we do in the key, basically prio targets, things of all that sort. When I'm using defensives, why I'm using defensives and what things. And yeah, that's I'm just basically going to be going over the commentary for the key. So I'm showing my talents currently that I used in the key. So I ended up not using DB. There's not really any pulls that you really need DB for. The only pulls that you need DB in this key would potentially be anything in the Vex area, which at this point we have enough stuns with both Warrior, Priest, Druid, and Paladin all have great interrupts, especially AoE interrupts. I'm obviously also still taking Blast Wave, so I still have one. I'd rather take, especially in a key that has a lot of AoE in it. I typically like leaning towards time manipulation because it does add a little bit, does add some AoE damage. Obviously, that's something that we need a little bit of help in, not a whole lot because we do relatively good AoE, but it kind of just helps getting us more Ice Novas off. Because in mass AoE, Ice Nova is a pretty good big damage spell, especially because it allows us all of our Frozen Orbs and Blizzards and stuff to crit. So I typically prefer to take time manipulation when I can. In terms of the spec tree, even on Tyrannical weeks, I actually end up. This is a change that I decided to make this week. Kind of wanted to see how it worked out. I decided to go with running Snowstorm instead of Wintertide. I think I'm going to do this on AA. I might potentially do this on another key, maybe like Halls of Valor or No-Kud. Probably not though, just because AA is a lot of like mass AoE pulls. Basically every pull you're doing is mass AoE. The only one that might kind of be like that would be like No-Kud. But for me, I went Snowstorm for this key. I kind of wanted to see how it worked out in terms of like prio damage and stuff like that. It also would help out. Our Warrior in this key decided he was going to go Fury, so that also kind of helps a little bit because Fury does a little bit more prio target damage than Arms does. So before I was basically like our designated single target player. Obviously Frost Mage is one of the best single target classes in the game. So obviously I was fine doing that. Obviously lower overalls, but you know, anything at times a key. But I decided to try out Snowstorm this week and he was going Fury. And I think it actually ended up working out pretty well. But yeah, we'll just get into the commentary. When does it start? Alright. The other thing that I actually ended up using for this key, obviously I'm using the Buzzing Rune, the Crit Rune, and then I'm using the Corrupting Rage file. The other thing you could potentially use the Verse file and then the Crit buff in this key. But I typically decide to go towards the Corrupting Rage file just because it is a lot more crit than the Crit buff. And using the Verse buff, because Verse is a flat 5% buff for this. Now this, we do actually we double pull this. We're not using Lust though because we're basically, after all the nerfs to the tree boss at the start of the tier, tree boss is basically no longer a concern in terms of being like the one boss that's going to wipe groups. It used to be that way, but now after all the buffs, it's kind of leveled out to being the two harder bosses in AA are Vex and Croth. Croth is a little bit more of a damage check, and then Vex is just a defensive check because all of the mana bombs and everything going out. So we're going Vex first, not doing. We're not lusting on this big pull. Obviously on Fort Weeks, this is probably a lust pull, but. Obviously here, running Snowstorm. I'd already used Ice Nova. And while I am running time manipulation, you're not always going to get... You don't want to wait the whole time for your Ice Nova to come back from your Fingers of Frost. So I actually end up using a Frost Nova into the Chrono Cold Shatter, which you can see down here in my spell queuing window. I did end up actually using a Frost Nova earlier, just because I had 2 or 3 orbs out at the time. While it's not great for... your Icy Propulsion, you're getting your Icy Veins back. Frost Nova in mass AoE, especially when you have multiple orbs out, can be pretty good for damage-wise. But Now you're seeing me actually doing the 2 Frost Novas and an Ice Nova in that. I'm basically going to be losing out on Icy Veins here. I basically just lost Icy Veins here, and I don't have it back, especially during Lust. So this whole area here is going to be me not really having much damage just because I don't have Icy Veins. But obviously, anytime you're running Snowstorm, you always want to be trying to do it in Rune if possible. And obviously, you get most value out of it. You wanted to use Rune into Ice Nova into Kona Cold. Obviously, if you don't have Ice Nova, like I did in the first pack, use Frost Nova to shatter your Kona Cold, but you always want to be shattering your Kona Cold no matter what, whether it's with Frost Nova or Ice Nova. Now for this, we kill all the mobs in the Vex area, and what we do next is, I did end up popping an Icy Veins at the end of that, or near the end of that pack, because while the RP is going on, as you see it, we still have 10 seconds left in the RP. We pull the Ravager pack out here with the rest of the little ones. Unfortunately, the jump actually messed up here. It's still considered the priest being an LOS, but now this is a very good AoE pack. This is why I decided I kind of wanted to run Snowstorm. Almost all of these packs are basically mass AoE, like I said. And you saw me using a Frost Nova again, just because I had multiple orbs out. But now again, like I said, in mass AoE, it's pretty important. Well, not really pretty important. It's using Ice Nova and AoE is relatively good. While it's not really considered part of the rotation, it's normally considered a filler. In terms of like mass AoE, it actually does relatively good damage, and obviously it's good with Kona Cold. So don't be afraid to use Ice Nova in these mass AoE pulls. While it might cause a little bit less Icy Veins uptime, the damage that you'll do from shattering your orbs and everything is relatively good. Now Vex is one of the harder bosses, at least for me, to survive on a mage. The mana bombs going out basically every 20 seconds. There's a lot of damage going out that we have to deal with. And we obviously don't have many... We don't have a lot of defensives to go through. We have a decent amount. You know, we have Barrier, we have Alter Time, we have 2 Ice Blocks, we have G-Invis, but the cooldowns are relatively long for all of them. The only one that's not really that long is Barrier. So the way that I kind of deal with most mana bombs, I'll kind of go through them as they happen. I typically, you'll always have a Barrier for every single mana bomb. I typically like to try and Alter Time almost every single one, but obviously always barriering them is basically a must for every single one. And there's a little gaming thing you can do with most of them, but I also like running Ice Flows because I get to move the entire time during Arcane Fissure, so I don't really have to worry about that. Alright, so first mana bomb. I'm using Barrier, I use Images, I used Alter, and then you can gain an additional little tiny shield with the Tempest Barrier talent, which you'll basically almost always take. So you actually get a little shield every time you blink. And obviously and then I Alter Time back to where I was, so I'm obviously back at 100 health. This basically means that the next one that I need to use is basically a Barrier and G-Invis, and then hopefully the one after that will be a Barrier, Alter, and Blink still up if I get it. You also want to be trying to save your Ice Blocks for the ones that are bad overlaps. And if you don't get a Mana Bomb, try and be collecting these Arcane Orbs if possible. Not really required, but obviously helps some. So you got a Mana Bomb for this one. I already had a Barrier rolling. I go into Alter Time. I blink out. You saw me drop to 10% health. It's very risky for you to actually only use Barrier and Blink. You basically want to be using at least 2 defenses for almost every one as a mage. There's a lot of damage per tick coming out for those, so be very careful with being greedy, I guess, with your defensives. We basically have 2 classes that are almost impossible to die, both Pharaoh Druid and a Warrior. They both have insane defensives, whereas a Priest and Mage are 2 of the worst classes in terms of like all these in terms of damage, things that are coming out very, very frequently. We just don't have that much mitigation in terms of like other classes do. Also, thank you for the follow, Elron. Again, like I said, any of these mana bombs, if you're not one of them, try and soak an orb if you can. Our plan as a group is basically we are trying to get... it seems like the bad overlap happens at about 2 minutes into the fight, and that's when an Arcane Fissure happens at the exact same time as the mana bomb. So the mana bomb does damage every second to you, as well as the explosion as soon as it ends, and the Arcane Fissure does damage the moment it happens. So if you don't actually let any orbs into the boss, so basically the boss's energy generates over time, and that's when he does the Arcane Fissure cast. If you don't actually let any orbs go in over time, at about the 2-minute mark, an Arcane Fissure overlaps with the mana bomb, so it hurts a lot. So here again, I have my cooldown, I have defensives. Obviously, it definitely hurts still here. I ended up using Mirror Image, or Greater Invis, but after the fact, so obviously it wouldn't have saved me. But I barriered into Mirror Image into Alter Time at the beginning, and I still basically died. I had whatever it was, 15% health left. So, like I said, there's a lot of damage going off of Mage here. It's probably one of the worst defensive fights for us to have to deal with, just due to the pure amount of damage that's going out. Now, if I get another mana bomb, I basically know I need to ice block it. I didn't use any ice blocks here. You can. There's not really any other things in the next few minutes that you need to be saving ice blocks for. So if you get any bad overlaps that you don't think you can survive, just ice block them. The thing with ice block is it does drop the mana bomb at that exact spot. So be very careful of when you're actually ice blocking. If you can get out to the outer ring before you do it, like you saw me trying to go to the same spot in the arena, in the little room, all the way on the outside, you can ice block there. But obviously if you can't, just ice block where you are. It still drops a little puddle, but... Oh, for here, I am running the Corrupting Rage file. Every so often you'll get a little debuff. This one actually happens because it happens when you take 100% worth of your health and damage. You'll get the Overwhelming Rage debuff, and then you don't get the crit buff for that time. And you actually suffer damage during this time. If you get this and try invising, your invis will actually break from the damage. So be very aware if you're ever doing invis skips, because you need to wait for that buff that debuff to drop off. I have bricked a fair amount of keys from that. There's also an RNG one that just happens randomly. You also just need to be aware of that. There's nothing you can really do about that, but it does happen. And now, as a basically a class that has very good prio damage, your two targets here should either be the Mystic Scepter, the one that does the Arcane Blast, and the Ravager. The Ravager is basically the most important one because it has the most amount of health, and it's the one that's going to be staying stationary the whole time. For us, you can actually bait the Vicious Ambush. The ambush actually goes on the player that's the furthest away. So in our case, our Disc Priest is actually the one doing the baiting. They're back here on the bridge. You can actually just bait it around the little pillars. So here, you see, I used again, during Rune of Power, I used my Frost Nova into the Cone of Cold, because I didn't have Ice Nova up at that time. And again, just try not to overcap on any of your procs, whether it's Fingers of Frost or your Flurry procs. If you can try and send your flurries on, not really cooldown, but try and make sure you almost always have a Winter's Chill on your prio target. Just because your Blizzard in your orb still will crit from Winter's Chill. You typically use Winter's Chill to proc or to crit with your Frozen Orb, but since it does just leave the debuff on the target, any of your AoE spells will also crit. So your Cone of Cold will have a greater chance to crit, your Ice Nova, anything. It just makes that mob act as if it's frozen. So trying to get your Winter's Chill on those targets is pretty beneficial. Not something you need to do, but it's a little min-maxy in terms of that. This is a spot where I typically pop my my personal lust, just because not many people are going to be setting cooldowns into this, and especially because I'm a very good single target class. You can send your personal lust into this. Because obviously your first lust will be on Vex, you'll get your 2 lusts on there, and the timing comes up that you'll get it here. Other than this, you just want to make sure you're going to have lust for Froth, if possible. You either want to be using your lust on Croth basically at the start of the pull, or during the Firestorm phase when damage is amplified. I actually haven't tried gaming the Expel Intruders that much. I know our Warrior basically just face tanks all of them, because, you know, Warrior things, they just don't die. I'm not positive Mage would be able to survive them, and I haven't really tested it. I don't really want to test it on these hierarchies. If you do, you basically would just have to alter time every single one. On these, again, obviously, Frost Mages have great prio damage. Make sure you're targeting the Alpha Eagles, the Elite Birds at this time. Again, like I said, if you can, try and line up your Root of Power with Cone of Cold. I actually ended up moving out of my Root of Power there to get my Cone of Cold off, which wasn't great, but, you know, it happens. Be very careful of what I'm doing here. Be very careful of actually getting aggro on these guys before your ping can actually get aggro on them, because you will die. They will just come down and one-shot you. I've learned that the hard way. You will just die to 1 melee or a peck, so be very careful. You see, I have Cone of Cold, and I try using my Rune of Power for it. Might not have been worth it at this time because the Alpha Eagles can't actually be frozen. So I didn't really get value from using Frost Nova to try and shatter it. You can try and throw them a little earlier so you get value off the small Eagles, but obviously that's just increasing your overall. It's not really huge. Not really that worth it there, but... Now here I know I'm telling my group that I don't actually have Lust up right when it comes off cooldown. So we're kind of debating whether we send Lust for a Firestorm, whether we send it with a Thundering, or when we send it basically as soon as it comes up. Not entirely sure I remember what we do. I think we just send it on Firestorm. And the reason behind that is because we only have 2 Lust left in the key. So trying to get a Lust out basically immediately as it's off cooldown doesn't really matter too much. It seems to happen with the Tyrannical key when you're actually waiting for Lust for Vex for so long. You can typically get 3 or 4 lusts out of this key if you're actually lusting first pull, just because it's a 32-minute key. That basically means you need to be lusting off cooldown, but it's very hard to actually get that much value. In terms of defenses for all the Deafening Screeches, so typically, again, like I always do for all the other bosses, always go into a boss with a pre-barrier. You don't really need to use anything for the first one. Obviously, a barrier is obviously nice, but there's no dot damage or anything else happening on this fight, so if you don't have a barrier for the first one, it's not that big of a deal, but obviously it saves your healer some form of healing. And then from here on out, I try saving Mirror Image so that it lines up with both the second and the third Screech, so I have it rolling for both of them. You saw that one hit me through barrier and mirror image and hit me down to about 60% health. The third one I typically like trying to use G-Invis for, if possible. And then the fourth one, we go to 4 stacks on our tyrannical ones. I always use Ice Block for the fourth one. If there is a spot a little below where I'm standing, you obviously can't see it right now. There's a spot where basically where my mouse is right now, down here, if you're down on the ground, that you can actually LOS the Deafening Screech. I haven't actually played around with it. I don't really want to test it on high key, but you can also alter time. You don't really need to use alter time if you're using G-Invis, just because the amount of DR that you're going to get from G-Invis itself. I typically use alter time if you're just like, if you just have barrier or have barrier image up for like the second one. But you can alter time almost every third one, every third Deafening Screech, or almost every other one. Now for Ice Block, you both remove your stacks of the Deafening Screech, so if I go back to show this, you actually remove your stacks of the Deafening Screech and also don't get hit from the next stack. So you see, as soon as I Ice Block, I lost my stacks of Deafening Screech. It's an immunity, so it will remove them. And then I also don't get the actual hit from this third one as long as you sit and block the entire duration. So that's the one thing you actually want to do, is make sure you're sitting and block for the entire duration of Deafening Screech. And now that we got Firestorm, this is where our Lust period. Unfortunately, I didn't have a pot or any runes up at this rune of power up at this time, so I kind of don't get great value from the Firestorm and Lust, but I could. It's not really worth us saving rune or like Icy Veins for those periods. It could potentially be worth saving pot, but this is the second one. I don't have a barrier only this time. I used it for the prior one, which you don't really need to use it for the first one. So I am kind of going to get chunked here for this one. Like I said, for the first one, you don't really actually need any defensives for it if you don't want, because it basically does no damage. Make sure you have defensives for the ones after, though. As you saw, that second one hit me for basically 80% of my health, and I had no defensives. You obviously can live it, but it's not great to not use any defensives, but this third Deafening Screech basically would hit me for 100% of my health. I had shield for basically 50% of it, through a 20% DR of images. And now you also want to make sure that you're using Shifting Power so that you get your G-Invis back. If you don't Shifting Power for your G-Invis, you won't actually get it back for the second set of 3. I actually don't need it here because I have another Ice Block. I typically like to try and save it. So it's the 4 stack now. The 4 stack for this one, I decided I didn't want to use block in case we ended up needing a 5th one, or later on in the fight, I might need to Ice Block. Like if our healer dies or something and we need to do the last little bit of damage, if I can Ice Block my stacks off later on when we don't have a healer up, that's beneficial. So what I did there is fine for the second set of 4th ones. I alter timed into a G-Invis. Now there are spots for ranged, well not just for range, for anybody that you can actually sit, that makes it so you don't get pushed back from the winds. I think I actually end up going to them eventually here, which I'll show you guys. Unfortunately, the spot currently is right where this tornado is, so I can't actually use it. Yeah, so I'm actually going to the spot. Now, it depends if you're on this one or on this one. On this one, the spot cannot get pushed back by the winds. is on the right side, whereas this one it's on the left side. So this spot right here will not get you pushed back by the winds, but this spot will. For this side, it's this spot will get you pushed back, and this spot won't. So you see where I'm standing right now, I'm not getting pushed back by the winds. Now for this, the way we've been doing this room lately is we're pulling everything, all the lashers, as well as one set of skitterflies. The best way that we've been doing this is if you poly, or if you hard CC the first skitterfly in the pack, so there's obviously packs of 3. The one that's leading it in the center is the one that's like considered like the leader of the pack, and the ones that the other ones follow. I've been polying it. I've been polying that one over here, so it's way out of the way of the rest of the room. So that way now we can basically pull the rest of the room and not have to worry about that set of skitterflies until we want to pull them in. Now, unfortunately, as a Frost Mage, you kind of want to wait for everything to be actually grouped up. So this entire time, I'm not doing any damage and just waiting for them to get grouped up. Now that they're grouped up, I can actually do damage. You want to try and be baiting the detonation seeds, if possible, away from your Rune of Power. So I did very good on this first Rune of Power. I baited it onto the side here, I ran to the other side, baited it here, and now I can just run back to the other side because that one exploded. Now this next Rune of Power I didn't really do very well. I'm pretty sure I lose all value of my Rune of Power here. Yeah, I lose all value here. I have my Rune of Power here and I can't really get value from it. And now we're also kiting away from my Rune of Power. It's kind of a really sad pull for Frost Mages because, you know, we have Blizzard and Rune of Power and Orb here, and now all the mobs are over here. So, it's something you can try and communicate with your tank, but a lot of the time, depending on the tank, you're kind of just going to have to suck it up. Because this is a pull that tanks are really going to have to run around with because they basically can't take all of the lasher hits without kiting it. It's just kind of unfortunate. And now here I'm trying to pay attention to make sure that my other skitterflies that I polyed are going to stay away. So now you see I basically threw out an orb, and then Ice Nova'd, and now I'm running back to this next pack because I need to poly them. And again, I'm polying the center one. Unfortunately, obviously, it's during Thundering, so I kind of lose a lot of damage here, but it's basically our way to make sure that we don't have 2 packs of skitterflies on us at once, especially because a Raging Week, a Raging Jump, along with the fact that the skitterflies rage themselves, is you basically will get one shot if any of the skitterflies are like max raging stacks. And now again, since I didn't have Ice Nova, I just went to the Frost Nova into a Cone Cold. Like I said, if you're ever using Cone Cold, make sure you always want to shatter it. Now for this boss, there's a lot of things that Frost Mage can kind of get value off of. I still haven't figured out the best way for me to be using my Snowstorm stacks. Typically, the first set of ads that spawn, the ones that spawn show talents at the end, I showed them at the beginning, Gary. The mobs that spawn in the first set that he spawns, the first set of Germinate ads, don't really do anything. They're the ones that stay stationary. They're not too important. The ones that are important are the ones that spawn the second set because those ones actually like come alive. But So I typically like saving my snowstorm stacks for those ones, but now I did blizzard here on single target. The reason I did this is because I did have snowstorm stacks running in from the pack prior. Unfortunately, Blizzard doesn't have an indicator for your snowstorm stacks for the timer. You can obviously get weak auras and everything for them, but I didn't because I don't like weak auras. Smile. Exactly what you said, Sai. Yep. I use my Blizzard just to refresh the buff. And now this is where I also like using Ice Flows, because I can cast the entire time. It's not really needed because you should have enough instant casts, either with Orb Out or you have your instant cast Blizzards. Now I did actually end up using my Snowstorm stacks there, because I was kind of been holding on to it for so long and I don't really want to hold on to it again. And I obviously can rebuild enough Snowstorm stacks to have it for the next set. You see I'm already at 17 stacks. Now as Frost Mage, our main job is obviously Prio damage. We have very good cleave and very good Prio. On Tyrannical weeks, I typically like target focusing these branch, just because the branch is something that actually needs to die before the next set of germinates. Because you actually need your poison, you actually need this debuff to be dispelled off of you. So I basically just go full single target on the branch. Obviously not full single target, I'm still sending blizzards and orbs, but I'm now proud targeting the branch instead of the boss at these times. And now this is where I use Ice Flows again. For burst forth, you always want to have some sort of defensive. So I really didn't use G-Invis there. Since I had mirror image rolling, I could have just used a barrier and I could have like alter timed it if I wanted. But I ended up using G-Invis. And now for here, you saw as soon as the mobs got kind of somewhat grouped up, I ended up using Ice Nova into using my Cone of Cold stacks. Unfortunately, I could have waited like 2 seconds and literally would have had a rune, and obviously would have been 30% increased damage. The other thing that I do with these Hungry Lashes is I actually do end up sending my Frost Novas. I typically send at least one every time the ones that attack the tank are out, just because it will actually increase the crit. The crit for my orb will actually help, and these mobs actually do need to die, whereas the ones that don't attack the tank don't necessarily need to die. Well, they obviously need to die, but they're not as big of a prio. I kind of fucked that Germinate, which kind of fucked our tank, so don't be greedy like I was. Now the way that, at least from my understanding, the way that the tree actually spawns is it spawns on one of the range players. It typically spawns on the furthest one away. Sorry, here that was like over here and the tree spawned here. But again, full single targeting the branch. Our warrior, because he is running Fury, is a lot more single target. He decided to basically go all single target. Well, not all single target. He's prioing and not padding, like the unethical, unethical Feral and I are. So you saw there, I had basically nothing going. I didn't die from Burst Forth because we had Rally, and I had a barrier. Going, but it's still very dangerous for us to not really use defenses for it. You can use Ice Block, you can use Alter Time, anything like that, but again, baiting the branch. And now I'm trying to bait my Frozen Orb where well, not really bait, but I'm making sure I'm out of the group before I throw my Frozen Orb. So when I throw my Frozen Orb, it's obviously hitting these mobs to start, and it's going to keep traveling and hitting these mobs. I don't typically, Gary. I typically like saving shifting in case I need defensives for this. I don't typically like using it defensively or offensively for Blizzard because I'll have enough. We have enough bleed. We have enough AoE damage in both Warrior and our Pharaoh Druid that I don't really need to make sure I get the second Blizzard off. But you can use it, yes. So I actually full sent my one there, but so you saw there, I actually I Frost Nova'd, and then I was gonna send my Cone of Cold, but I got knocked up from a Storming, so instead of sending it, I waited, and then I Runa Powered into another Frost Nova into my Cone of Cold. Now at this point we have 8 minutes left. We basically have like two... we basically have like two trash pulls. Because we end up always pulling a trash pack into the boss. For one of two reasons. There's one mob that our priest can actually dominate mind and give me a haste buff. And the second is it's kind of just very good cleave for me, as well as somewhat for a warrior. But we basically have this pull, we have another double pull, and then we have the pull into boss. As the rest of our pulls. I'm focusing Echo Knights here. I could be focusing the Arcane Missile person, but obviously they have the least amount of health, and obviously I'm very good prio damage, so I don't really want to be killing them off as soon as possible. Obviously it's important for us to get the kicks, but the Echo Knights here are going to last a long time, so I'd rather spend my abilities into the Echo Knights than sending it into the caster. As you can see, the one Echo Knight that I'm actually focusing is currently at 17% health, and the rest of them are at like 40. And the caster's already dead, and I obviously didn't even focus the caster, so... Now here, we actually decided, we were kind of decent on time. The only time we've been bringing it into buffs is when we've been short on time. Here we were pretty good on time, so we just decided we were going to do the double pull and kill it here. Kind of an impromptu decision. Has its pros and cons, but it ends up working out fine for us, but... We still ended up doing the Dominate Mind. So you see this mob here, it's the Restorer that it's called. It's dominated. And the buff they cast is this right here. And it basically increases your spell haste. As you can see, I'm going very fast. Well, my spells are happening very fast. The unfortunate thing is it's a very small shield. So if you see in my frames, obviously it's kind of hard to see sometimes. It's not great quality. Well, I mean, it's okay quality, but it's very small. This little yellow bar right here is how big the shield is. So basically anything that I get hit by will cancel the shield. It's incredibly small. The shield doesn't actually scale with key level. So it's really hard for you to actually spell steal it, because it normally casts on an enemy target. And you can target, like if you're targeting the Invoker and they cast on an enemy mob, you can obviously find out who their target is and spell steal it off of it, but it basically requires like an instant spell steal because the shield is incredibly tiny. But yeah, now we have this Invoker, the Restorer for the rest of the pack. The only thing is we basically need to be aware of it going to our Priest and actually hitting them, because Dominate Mind is a lot of threat generation. You saw it literally just ran at them and they had a Psychic Scream. But the only thing is you do get this debuff. The debuff basically makes it so you can't get the buff for a minute. But other than that, you can... I think we end up killing it at like 30% when the boss is at like 30%. It's just something that you have to make sure that the Priest doesn't die from it. But and now our decision here is we're going to Lust when Thundering comes up. We're just holding cooldowns for Thundering. We're saving Lust for it. And now you see all of us are using our CCs to make sure that the mob actually doesn't get out there. I just blinked there because I wanted to make sure I didn't get it. And now you see I got the buff. I'm not even in Lust. It only says I have 20% haste because it doesn't actually count. Because it's not all haste, it's just spell haste. But as you can see, I'm basically like incredibly fast cast speed. I'm like max cast speed, which has its pros and cons because Frost Mage kind of struggles with like proc stuff with max speed. But so like here, I'm obviously gonna lose the shield, but I obviously only had 5 seconds left. And now the reason, so the way that these little bombs work in this dungeon is every time you get hit from a thing, you get 1 stack of the debuff. The debuff actually increases your damage. I think it's by 5% for everything. It's either 5 or 10%. I'm not entirely sure which one it is, but I know it is a damage increase. So you can game the stacks a little bit. The only issue with gaming the stacks is once you get 3 stacks, you actually drop a puddle. So that's why when I know I'm at 2 stacks now, and I have this energy bomb, I'm always going to get this 3rd stack, and it's going to drop the pool. So it obviously dropped the pool out there, and I'm back at 0 stacks now. When you do get the 3 stacks, you want to make sure you're actually on the outside of the room, just like this one is. Just want to make sure it's good for your all your melee and everything like that. I did try blizzarding there, thinking we were going to keep the mob alive. Wait. Did I see what I think I just saw? Oh, never mind. We can continue. But yeah, once you take damage, if you take damage, you'll lose the buff. So if you have the shield on and you take the little tiny bit of damage, the buff disappears. So that's why you need to be aware of when you're actually going to have the buff and not. Also, I love my character started the random spin. Really great, really enjoy it. And I told my priest again here I didn't have the debuff, so he put the shield on me. As I said, also the one thing that happens with it is that shield is actually the first one that takes damage. Not sure why it's that way, but it will take damage. Like I took damage now and I lost the haste. But yeah, it's a very small shield. You're not really gonna get much value from it, but. Now here we decided we're just going to kill the mob. It's not really worth us getting any more out of them because I have the debuff for 45 seconds. So we just decided we're going to kill it. He did actually use Celestial Shield. I'm actually not positive if I spell steal it when I have the debuff, if I can actually spell steal it or not. I don't think so, but I am not positive. And now here, I normally blink out of this, but because I was like mid-cast and I was like, I kind of want to finish the cast, I just decided to ice block. I have 2 ice blocks left, like I'm not going to use the ice blocks for anything else, so I just decided to ice block. And the fact that I'm also in my rune. So yeah, I wanted to stay in my rune. With barrier up, does it protect? No. It is the first, that shield, the damage shield, or the haste shield that it gives you, is actually the first form of damage that it takes. Which just sucks, but... So even with running, so obviously Frost Mage, especially in our group, I'm a lot more of like a single target person, as the rest of our group have a lot of AoE. Even running Snowstorm, I'm still topping boss meters just because our class is incredibly good at single target. So I didn't really feel like it was that much of a loss for dropping Wintertide for Snowstorm, considering how much damage Snowstorm actually does in these mass AoE keys. I obviously don't get full value from Snowstorm. There are times where I'm dropping Snowstorm stacks, or I'm not getting the full value. There are times where if you're like going in between packs and you're going to lose it, maybe you can send, a 20 stack Snowstorm if you're going to shatter it in Rune, rather than sending a 30 stack Snowstorm without Rune. I haven't really figured out gaming. I'm pretty sure like sending it in Rune is always better if you can. But I think taking Snowstorm for this key was better than taking Wintertide, even on Tyrannical weeks. As you see, we obviously all did very well. Druid did 156k. I did 140, our Warrior 138. Our Warrior's a lot more prio target. Same with me basically being a Frost Mage. I'm a lot more prio target. We have very good prio damage. But he basically went full prio instead of like padding. Whereas I went a little bit more pad than normal. But yeah, that's the 25 AA. We timed it with 1 minute and 5 seconds left. We are gonna be trying a 26 AA this week, which is on Fort. We're obviously gonna be going full AOE pad because why not? It's AA. But we'll have to see if we can actually time that or not, because some of these dungeons, as soon as you get to a certain key level, it seems to be harder and harder if you don't actually have meta comps, S Priest and Rogue and all that shenanigans. But yeah, that's the 25A tyrannical commentary, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.